I don't normally start my talks by apologizing. A lot of people probably think I should, but I don't. I found out 3 days ago that I was going to give this talk, and so I was thinking to myself, as Wendy was asking me to do this, wow, I should talk about the Perl internals. And my brain was saying, but you don't know anything about Perl internals. And my body was thinking, your mind is writing code that your body can't compile. And so I said, well, just make up some title, and I'll figure out what the talk's going to be later. Fortunately, it was one that I think I can actually talk about. It's me doing 20 years of Perl stuff. I have a lot of experience with me doing 20 years of Perl stuff, so I think this talk is going to go pretty well. It is live streaming to Facebook, where David Adler has promised that he will correct all of my lies and misrepresentations. So you can check that out. If you cannot hear me or see the slides, I have these on SlideShare, so you can download them. You got the URL, great, we'll move on. When I was in Amsterdam in June of this year, Wendy came up to me and said, do you realize it's the 20th anniversary of Perl mongers? And my mind was thinking, maybe I should talk about Perl internals. My body was saying, you're writing code your body can't compile. And I was like, okay, 21. And I counted up, and yeah, it's if you take 1997 away from 2017, you get 20 years. The great thing about this talk is if I wait another 10 years, 12 years, and I could just do it in base, what is it, 16? Okay. So we have this. And so what do you do when you have an anniversary in Perl mongers like this? Well, you make a t-shirt. If you want to get the sort of t-shirt, I have some here with me because I made some samples. Otherwise, you're going to have to pay a lot in shipping to get them to Europe from the Kickstarter. So you can see me after. That's all I have to say about that. Most of you probably know me from one of these Perl books. And I think all of these books are out in the display that Wendy and Liz have set up in the back. And I actually went through and found books that I didn't realize I'd ever contributed to. So I signed those ones as well. I do the same thing in bookstores, by the way. On the off chance that I find one of my books, it must be a rarity nowadays to find any sort of Perl book there, especially one that I've written. Okay, so let's get into it then. What have I done in my 20 years? Surprisingly, I have forgotten a lot of this. Researching this was quite a bit of fun, and so just forgive me, I might be off a couple years, plus or minus 2 on some of these. The months got all mixed up. I didn't want to spend that much time figuring out exactly the dates. And I'm going to give you, along with my 20 years, 20 lessons I've learned along the way. Now, the beauty of this sort of thing is that I can present the lessons as if I learned them in the same year that I should have learned them. Hindsight is beautiful. So don't hold me to that either. Most of the stuff I didn't actually learn in the year I present. So let's start in somewhere in the 90s. So who remembers the 90s? Okay, some people. I used to give Perl classes and I would say, okay, who saw Star Wars in the theater? And then it turned out to be who saw Empire Strikes Back in the theater, and then it got to be who saw Star Wars in the theater, and they're like, which one? And now no one ever knows what Star Trek is, or Star Wars is. I'll get those mixed up. I used to do this. I would bang things together, and I would make a big car wreck out of things, and then I would look at the results, see what happened, and try to figure out why they banged together like that and why those things came out. I would work on computers that looked like this. These were actually the small ones. These are the half cabinets. So who has seen one of these that's not in a museum? Okay, some hands went down. I actually rescued one of these off a loading dock when I was in grad school to put it in my apartment so it could be a space heater. It turns out that just get the regular space heaters. They're less wasteful. These things got very hot. I used to work in Massachusetts, so of course that was DEC territory, which means you had to use VAX and use VMS, and that was still the time that we were using things like this. Now who's heard of these things? Okay, who's actually had to use them? Okay, who's used them for running computer programs? Okay, some people, their hands go up. They also make very nice fires when you put them in your wood stove. These things burn very hot. So another way to heat your stuff during those Massachusetts winters. Now at this time, I didn't know Perl. I knew a little bit of C, I knew a lot of Fortran, I knew some BASIC, I knew some other stuff, but I kept seeing things like this. Now who recognizes that? Anyone? No one recognizes that regular expression? You've never used that before? Well, me neither, I don't know. But I would see things like this, and this is my memory of what I was seeing when people were talking about this. There's this stuff I don't understand, but the stuff they're talking about, the stuff that they are accomplishing with this is really amazing. And I said, well, if you can do something with just those 3 characters, well, I want to find out about this. And this is one of the first lessons I sort of learned when I got into seriously doing computer stuff and not just doing computers for something else, is that, don't be scared of what you're looking at. And you might not understand it, but if you spend the time to figure out what's going on, you're probably going to get some benefit out of it. And this applies to just about any language. Well, I mean, there's probably a few exceptions. I mean, I don't want to go back to do Java, but I never really figured out how to do useful things in that. I'm sure some people have. I try not to disparage any other languages like, say Python or Ruby. Okay. And then I used to have the receipts for these. I had pictures of the receipts. I know that I was doing this in this year because I went out and I said, I want to learn this language, and so I bought Programming Perl. I have the receipt for that. I bought it in the Barnes & Noble in Amherst, Massachusetts, and then I have the receipt for 2 days later when I went back and I bought Learning Perl. Okay, I tried to read Programming Perl and pick it up and said, nope, I need something a little bit more training wheels oriented. Curiously, in that same year, this book came out. How many people remember that there was a thing called Macintosh? Yeah, they used to have one of these things, and Vicki Brown and Chris Nandor wrote this and put it out there, and he just turned it into a PDF. It's on his Twitter feed last couple days, so if you still have your Macs running, anyone? Okay, no hands went up for that one. You can learn how to run Perl on that, and I think that's Perl 4, which, how many people are still programming in Perl 4? Oh, I thought a hand went up. She's just scratching her face. Okay, if you weren't programming then maybe you won't understand this slide. Now, this was high tech. You don't appreciate it nowadays. You got all of your web frameworks and your libraries and your CPANs and all this sort of stuff. But this was amazing. You loaded these modules. Well, wait, there weren't even modules because we didn't have modules yet. This is Perl 4 stuff. You required these things, and then you could do some fancy stuff like decode a web form. That was cool. You could decode a web form. Forget about all that other stuff. And then you could talk to another server. Oh my God, this is amazing. This language is beautiful. But then, I learned another lesson along the way. It's going to get better. Whatever you're doing right now, it's going to get better. But I also learned that if you just ignore something long enough, it will go away and something else will happen. And that is my approach to JavaScript frameworks, by the way. If I just don't think about it for a while, there'll be another one, and I can ignore that one for a couple years. Okay, but I'm still doing physics stuff. I'm still really in the service of science, or what I think is science is one of the reasons I'm not doing it anymore. It's really something else going on. And there are lessons to learn about how you're applying computer stuff. And so I started doing Tickle and TK. And I went to find a picture of this so I could show you what TK is. And how many people have seen a TK thing? Wow, a lot of people. This is amazing. This is like we are actually in the 90s still. And I found this picture in the first results for Google Images, and I'm like, that's cool, that's exactly what I want. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, wait, I made that. So either my picture is really popular and really relevant to what the search is, or Google knows a lot about what I'm looking for. I think maybe both are really scary. But this is a lesson that I learned pretty quickly in grad school, because grad school is all about learning how to convince other people to give you money so you can stay in academia. It's called the grant writing process. And what you have to do is make pretty pictures. Make things pretty. Now, honestly, if you think about one of the reasons that some other languages might have gotten ahead of Perl is because they learned a lesson that we didn't, make the thing pretty. Ruby somehow has friends who are designers. I don't know how they did that. I don't know how they tolerate those people. I just don't understand when they say things, but they have them and they draw pretty pictures of things that look like gyms and so on and so on. If you make it pretty, it looks a lot better than what it might actually be. Now, Ruby's a fine language. I hear it came out as 2 languages that I really like, Perl and Smalltalk. But they got designers. Anyway, so that's a lesson that I learned pretty early. The trick is, I know to make it pretty, I just can't do it myself. I'm total crap with design. I wish more people realized that too, because then I wouldn't have to look at their web pages. Okay, so now the early 90s is sort of in our rearview mirror now, and I can get into things where I can actually tag a year to it. So we get it to 1994. And again, this is where I'm working. I'm at Brookhaven National Lab. This is in the middle of Long Island. There in the middle of the picture is the alternating gradient synchrotron. And there in the top you see another part of a ring, the RIC, the relativistic heavy ion collider. This is the thing that we are going to do to beat the world in science, and then you guys in Europe made this thing that's 27 kilometers around, and you verified the Higgs boson, which Fermilab discovered. No gasp? Oh, that was supposed to be a really good joke that you would come up and throw things at me. Okay, but I was working here. Interesting little story here that has nothing to do with Perl. My office mate, he was in the nuclear facility where we were working. There was a small electrical fire, a poof of radiation went into his face. He got the full Silkwood treatment. You know, the big burly guys came in the hazmat suits and took him to the showers and scrubbed him down. Buried his clothes in the contamination area out probably right in the middle of that dirt pile there. And then he walked home in paper pants. The postscript for that story is better though. I mean that was pretty funny. But the postscript is funny as it got in the paper saying that our group had been studying an alien that Brookhaven had captured, the Brookhaven lab. They always call it the Brookhaven lab. Look at the picture, there's 5,000 buildings. Inside the Brookhaven lab, well, I mean, it's a huge campus. An alien woke up during some sort of dissection and grabbed his phaser gun and shot something, and then they had this response. Because, you know, if you look at it close enough, you see a couple of spaceships landed there, right? If you look at it just from above, there's two circles. Curiously, Apple is calling their new campus the spaceship, or something like that, right? I don't know. Okay, anyway, inside this lab, all these buildings are filled with something that some of you might have seen before. This actually comes from a Pinterest group which is devoted to showing you pictures of computer paper. There had to be one, right? There had to be one. And I was given the job to go through about 3,000 printouts, circle two numbers somewhere on page 50 or 55 or something like that, find two other numbers in the 70s, and then multiply those together and make a list. So I figured out that on all these printouts, and if you've done these sort of things before where you've seen this paper, what's on the first page of the printout? Anyone? The banner, right? Who ran the job, what file it is, and all that sort of great stuff. And so what I did is I said, hey, I'm not going to look through all of these files. I'm going to go down to a room that looks something like this with two guys sitting in it. I don't recall them wearing suits. But I went down there and said, hey, I've got this thing here. Do you have those files? And of course it says where the files are. And so he goes and looks in the file list and he says, yeah, we got those. And I said, can I get an account? And he said, oh, and so I learned my next lesson. I said, what sort of beer do you drink? I know I'm going to cause you a lot of troubles this summer, so why don't I just sort of preempt that annoyance, and Belgian beers goes a long, long way. I give this advice a lot to coders who are trying to get things done in their company. Find the marketing guy, find the sales guy, find the accounting guy you have to work with, find out what their favorite beer is and give them a beer basket. And they're like, why should I do that? They should just do whatever I want. I'm like, yeah, should and will is different. Just make your life easier. How much is it going to cost you? How much does a basket of Belgian beers cost nowadays? No one this group should know this. Dave, you should know this. Okay, but so I got this thing. I got all these files. I got a true 64 Unix account. Anyone remember that? The DEC version of Unix. And was that a woohoo? And I wrote a little Perl program, and I extracted these values because the output's very, very nice. These simulation things that they run are very, very annoying. They're written in Fortran 4, but the output's really, really nice. And so it's easy to extract. I did all this. I am standing on the stoop with all of the ex-Soviet scientists who are smoking. And they're asking me, oh, how are you doing on that project? And I make the huge mistake of saying, if I don't have it done by the end of the day, tomorrow morning. And one of them turned to the other guy and said, did you explain to him what he has to do? And he said, yeah, I told him. And they didn't realize I was going to do it with computers. They thought I was going to sit there and write it down on some legal pad or something, and that they wouldn't have to talk to me for 3 months until I finished this thing. So the next lesson, and this is a good lesson in a lot of areas, just not computer programming or Perl programming. It sets an unreasonable level of expectation. You might not finish that quickly some other time. Let it sit there for a while. There's things like Minesweeper, Usenet, that sort of stuff. You can do that. There's not Usenet anymore? Yeah, none of my friends use it. But also, don't say how you did it. Okay, yeah, I got this done. It was no big deal. And just let them think about that. Let them feel inferior. Let them wonder how much magic you have. If you tell them how you did it, they don't need you anymore. They'll get someone else to do the same thing. Now, who remembers this? Who's seen this? What is this called? A shelf? Oh yeah, how many people have seen shelves? Forget the books on it. Forget the books. This is the gray wall. There's also an orange wall. This is the manual for the stuff you can run when you've got VMS going, this thing called DCL and many other things. And so a lot of physics isn't physics at all. It's some grad student sitting in front of a computer watching the blinking lights, literally watching the blinking lights. That's not a metaphor, because often this is bespoke hardware that's hooked up with wires and things. And if the blinking lights stop, there's a phone number you're supposed to call. And someone who knows what they're doing comes in and makes the blinking lights start again. I don't have that lesson in here. Don't try to unplug the wires yourself and plug them back in, because they never end up in the same place they were. A lot of people's theses are built on the fact that they're the ones who know where the wires go. Okay, so I would sit there and people would do all sorts of things. Read the newspaper, do crosswords, that sort of stuff. No, I got this gray wall. I started just reading those. What else am I going to do? And then pretty soon I figured out, wow, all this sort of stuff you can do in VMS that I didn't even know about. And so I had this idea. There's this thing we always had to do. We had to run the simulation. It was a Fortran 4 thing. It took about 4 hours to run. And at the end, you'd get these answers, and then you'd have to run another simulation, and so on. But there was a limited number of inputs. There was only so many things I can shoot at some particles, and only so many particles I was able to shoot particles at. I had so many different foils and so many different things, so I make all the combinations. I make all the combinations of energies. That's not so bad. And just at 5 o'clock, when everyone goes home, or everyone who gets paid goes home, I start my jobs on the VAX. I say, just keep running until 8 a.m. when everyone comes back. 100% CPU use, 5 o'clock to 8 a.m. I just did all the simulations. I printed them out, I put them in a binder. I made pretty pictures. Well, they were pretty to me, they were nice graphs. And I was like, wow, I'm gonna show everyone this cool binder. Now, remember those lessons I had before, right? Didn't learn them. This is what ultimately made me have to leave grad school. The director of the lab did not like this. What do you mean you can just go look them up? No, run it again, it's different. You have to run it again. It's different if you run it. No, the answers pretty much come out the same input. It's a deterministic thing. The other scientists who I told about this would have to sneak over to see me. Hey, can I borrow that binder? Yeah, it's under the desk, the third desk. Stealth automate stuff. Remember I say don't tell anyone how you did it? Well, first the lesson before that, right, was don't tell anyone you did it. This, you have to be kind of careful. You can code yourself right out of a job. Not that you should have a job to code yourself out of. I was able to do all sorts of other things which I didn't appreciate either. But a lesson I learned in grad school. And I found it's not much better in business either. Okay, so now I told you about that program where I went through all the line printer paper and did all that sort of stuff. That was a Perl script, and so I was kind of proud about that. And the scientist that I was working with, a nice Romanian guy who taught me a lot about physics, said, hey, I got this other task. Sort of the siren call to programmers. Hey, I got something close to what you're doing. Can I, give me that program? I said, okay, I'll give you that program. And then he gives it to 2 friends, and they give it to 2 friends, and so on, and so on, and so on. And pretty soon, I am supporting this thing that's mission critical across the lab. Everyone who's using this simulation wants to use my thing. Oh, hey, I don't want those numbers on page 50. Can you get the ones on page 49? Well, I mean, I can. And pretty soon, I'm doing everyone else's work instead of my own group stuff. So, the lesson I learned, well, these are lessons I should have learned. I'm acting like I learned them, but I really didn't. Just don't distribute your code. Don't give it to anyone. Now, I haven't done any studies on this, so this is anecdotal. This is completely anecdotal, is that most problems crop up when people use your code. So if your goal is to be left alone, well, then there's an obvious connection there that you can just sever that you get to use my code part. But there's another lesson to learn. Or just, for me, it was stay out of academia. And so I had to leave. And I go and say, oh, there's this other thing called the interwebs. And it's hot and it pays a lot of money and people are just throwing buckets of money at you to do stuff. And that's 1996. Because another thing I'd been doing in grad school was this. Now, I know you probably can't see the fine print there, but that is the comic book guy from The Simpsons using Read News. Now, what was the successor to Read News? How many people know this? I know there's at least one person in the audience. Okay, there's RN. And what did RN invent? Well, not invent necessarily. I was surprised. Now, Larry might correct me, but please not during the talk because it sounds better the way I'm going to say it. Is that when I look back at all the things that make my life easy, they all lead back to Larry somehow. Patch. RN with kill files. Oh, this is fantastic. Okay, but that same year, some other things happened. The Perl Journal starts. This is John Orwant's magazine for Perl. Okay, so Perl is taking off. He tells this story that the first issue was so popular that when he didn't realize how many boxes it was going to take for all the issues that he ordered, and this 18-wheeler truck pulls up, this 50-foot truck, drops off pallets at his apartment door and says, hey, good luck. Perl was exploding at this point. Okay, so that's 1996. Let's move on to 1997, where things really take off because we have the original. So this is a Perl conference, but this is Perl Conference 2.0. This was the first one. This is the one that I think it was about the same attendance. This is in, where was it, Dave? Monterey? San Jose, where we invented Perl mongers. Dave and I were there. We started this thing because it started off as this. This was a joke. You're sitting around thinking whatever you're thinking as you're eating your lunch. And since it's in California, your lunch has avocado and sprouts on it. Everyone thought that was his word until Dave shows up and says, why is there avocado and sprouts on my sandwich? I said, I just said that. We're both from New York. We say, okay, we can have this thing. We get a phone number. We're not even thinking about web addresses. Like today, you would do this with like whatever sort of top-level domain you can get. We're making up phone numbers because this is 1997. We can say use NYPM. But then, okay, so New York.pm because we're going to call a user group that. But, okay, so it's like that because, okay, it's like a Perl module. But we get, okay, NY Perl, okay, M. Okay, M. Maniacs was a choice. It was a regex. It was a regex. And then there are a few other things. I think there was some optional bits in the regex, and we ended up with mongers. So this is the start of Perl mongers. It was myself, David, Adam Turoff, Piglet, Simon, and a few other people are sitting around the table. Who? Eli, yes, Eli the bearded, who writes in really awful regular expressions. Okay. And I get back from this thing and I write my first Perl module that I upload to CPAN, Chemistry Elements. Only probably useful to me. I don't know anyone who's ever used it. That's how most code is going to be. But then when I tweeted a picture of this code, I think it was last year, I got the hugest response, the most fervent response I've ever got from any tweet I've ever done. And it was just a picture of my periodic table list. All it is some QW, and there's a bunch of strings in there that I just formatted like a periodic table. What was that lesson before? Make it pretty, Yeah, it doesn't matter if I don't have all that white space there. It's the same thing. It's the same code. To me, it acts the same. It doesn't change how I deal with it. If I want to find an element, I just, find it with my search box. But yeah, everyone in the internet like this one. Okay, make it pretty. I'm still not learning these lessons. Okay, 1998, no big deal. I do business ISBN. Now I had this particular job with a publisher, and they had to deal with ISBNs, and they had this huge database internally, and they couldn't manage it because there are all these errors in it. Again, when you let people use computers, they type the wrong things, they put them out of order, and so I said, okay, I've got to go through and cleanse this database. I will write a module that will validate the ISBNs, and this is the beautiful thing about this particular task, is that since I know what the publisher is, I know what their publisher code should be, so that means if their checksum is off, I know where the error is. I know what the beginning thing should be. I know what the publisher code should be. I can fix that. All they wanted to know which ones were dirty. They didn't ask me to fix them, but I did. And it saved someone in that company a ton of work because they probably had someone who just sat there and just rekeyed stuff. Now again, I don't know if they learned the lessons of don't tell them that you're done. I don't know anything about that part, but I had this little bit that I picked up there that if you go and you look at what problem they're actually trying to solve, they're probably going to be really happy. Now that problem they're trying to solve might not be the thing that makes sense to you, but it makes sense to them. Now around this time I was still doing that Usenet thing. I caught the eye of Randall Schwartz, started working for Stonehenge, no big story there. We did Perl trainings and wrote books and stuff like that. But New York Perl mongers was really a drinking group at that point. The whole idea of Perl mongers is that you would get together and you'd get drunk with a lot of people and they would remember who you are if you needed to find a job somewhere else because your startup failed. That was and I say that honestly, that was what it was. It's like, I need to get another job right now. People already know who I am. Let's go get it. This is before LinkedIn, before all that sort of crazy stuff. So the other lesson that I got to was hang out in bars. Hang out in bars with people that can help you. I guess that's what it is. Just don't hang out in random bars. The bars have to make sense for what your goals are. So it's not sufficient, but it might be necessary. Okay, so we start Perl mongers. NYPM is going. Everyone gets jealous, and I don't remember the order, and I didn't have time to look this up. Dave will correct me on Facebook, but I think Boston was next because they always have to be second to New York. That's an American joke, don't worry about it. It will be better on Facebook. And then London was somewhere in there, Seattle was somewhere in there, and there were two others, because there was the big six the first, or the second year, I should say.
Philly maybe?
Philadelphia was one, and I don't remember the other. I do not know, because that was a long time ago. Okay, so what did I learn? So I learned never get involved in a land war in Asia. No, really, don't have drinking contests with London.pm. We thought in New York that we were aces, that we were top, that we could hold our own. No, I don't drink at all, so I just thought this was really funny. But we had some serious drinkers at NYPM, and the London people were like, "You guys are tired? We just showed up." Okay, let's move on. In 1999, Perl mongers really takes off. I think we make 200 groups, and we do this very low tech. We just put out pieces of paper on a big table. You come, you find a piece of paper with your city on it, you put your name on it, and then we hand off that paper to someone else later.
Well, so if you wanted to lead the group, you put a star next to your name.
Yeah, if you put a star next to your name if you wanted to lead the group. And I don't know how many people actually did that, but the whole idea I had with that at that point was just facilitate it. Don't control it. Don't try to tell them what to do. Just connect people. And then as part of that, we started this thing called the White Camel Awards. Now, this one is not from 1999 or whatever year I'm on right now. This is Wendy and Liz, I think, last year getting their award. They are organizers for this. They do all sorts of stuff. They sponsored me to come here. Oh, by the way, I should say that All Around the World has sponsored this talk by lending me this clicker. If you need to talk to them, Ovid is right there. You have to acknowledge your sponsors. Not one of the lessons in the slides. we made this award to recognize non-technical contributions to Perl, because that was something that was important to me and important to other people. Is there's a lot of stuff that has to happen for this stuff to keep going, and it's not fun, it's very dirty, it's boring, it burns people out, but you give them a piece of lucite with a camel on it, and they're good for another 20 years. Right, Wendy? You're good for another 20 years?
I'm still here.
Yeah, and you got one. Which year did you get one, Dave?
Whatever the last year you...
Yeah, you see, we don't know the years. We just know. Tom Christensen started Perl Power Tools at that point. This was an attempt to make all the nice Unix things exist on Windows. Everyone does this sort of thing because I used to work on VMS, and so I wrote my LS program so I can use it in VMS. I only say this at this point for me because I now maintain this. I brought it back and called it Perl Power Tools rather than PPT, which he called it. What happens when you Google PPT? You get PowerPoint. You get all the PowerPoint decks in the world, none of which matter to you as far as Perl goes. That was the year that YAPC started. So I don't claim to do this, but I think it's a pretty good story, is that since I was running Perl Mongers at that point, I started casting around for someone to run a conference that would be on the East Coast. And I wrote to people in Boston, in Philadelphia, in Pittsburgh, and a few other places, and said, hey, let's do a conference. Now, I think that's probably where my involvement ends. So I didn't invent the thing, but Kevin Linzo then goes and does it in Pittsburgh at Carnegie Mellon. And we get YAPC, which then turns into YAPC Europe because they have to have one too, and then now you're here. So that's all from '99. Of course, how many people expected something to come after 1999? No, really, because this is Y2K, right? This is when the world was going to end. I ended that year in the Caymans because if all the planes are going to stop flying and crash into the ground and that sort of stuff, that's where I'm going to stay. The YAPC, by the way, in 2000 was YAPC 19100. The Perl journal that John had started had shut down, so I was stupid enough to make a new magazine called the Perl Review. Oh my God, I don't learn any lessons at all. I'm not going to say too much about that. It ran for a few years. I got tired of dealing with the post office and shut it down. Now, this is a little fuzzy, but at that year's Perl conference, if it was still called that, it might have been OSCON by that point, I don't know. Graham, now this is how it's in my mind, and please, if you know the truth, don't tell me because it's better in my mind. I'm talking to Graham Barr, he's like, hey, come look at this thing I'm doing. He shows me this. Now remember, this is 2000. It looks like this in 2000. This is from this morning. It looks like this today. We have the search engine for CPAN. Holy cow. That's really cool. I said, hey, Graham, that's great. I got to go to a meeting. This is where Perl 6 is invented. For some reason, I'm in the room. I think it was because I happened to be walking with Chip Salzenberg at the time, and I just sort of followed him into the room, and then there was a seat available, and I sat down in it. But then they start talking about what's the future of Perl, and we're talking about all sorts of things, and I say my one thing that's stupid. And then this happens. Well, not this. I mean, this is a recreation. That is the actual person. It's not an actor portraying it. But John says, okay, we got to do something big, and he punctuates his statement with the coffee cups in the air. And then I remember this distinctly, that the first thing that Larry said was, well, I don't actually remember what he said. So it's just in my head, don't correct me. Distributed computing is the future. And we're going to get that in Perl 6 eventually. Those hyperoperators and all that sort of fancy things are just waiting to be connected to the internet. And once it is, when you want to do parallel computing, it will just go out into the internet and do like a SETI at home thing across all the computers everywhere, and your program will run faster. No, seriously. Okay, I'm not going to implement it. I'm not saying I'm the one who's going to do it. The same year, we get this other thing, spreadsheet write Excel. There's another great lesson here. If you want to make the business people like you, create spreadsheets for them. They love this stuff. Now, if there was a module to automatically create their PowerPoint decks, they would love you even more. Like it filled in the content, like it went and found, like you just put in some keywords. I want AI, cloud, and frogs. Okay, now here's your PowerPoint presentation. There you go, go give your talk. Okay, so there's the lesson, make spreadsheets. This is the same year that this thing started, Perl Monks. Is anyone on Perl monks? Was anyone on Perl monks? Okay, some more hands go up. Some go down. Some people who are on Perl monks weren't on Perl monks, I guess. This was nice. We had this sort of system that we can go and talk about Perl, and it had voting and all this sort of stuff. 2001 happens. How many people realize that we didn't get test more until 2001? 3, 4, okay, 6. I'm surprised. It just seems like one of those things that was always there, but no, this is when Schwerin did it. This is the same year that I moved to Chicago because New York was getting just a bit too crazy. And I didn't actually invent this till 5 years later. But this is the logo for the Chicago Perl mongers. Now, the lesson I learned from this thing, don't wear that in Chicago. Does anyone know what the stars stand for? The Chicago flag has 6-pointed stars there. Well, it doesn't really matter. It's Fort Dearborn, the World Exposition, and 2 other things important to Chicago. The police don't particularly like seeing this shirt. They think it's down with police or something like that. Okay, so 2002 happens. I wrote this thing called Release. The other person who uses this is at this conference. So there's 2 of us. All it does is say, it's Tux over there. I was releasing modules to CPAN. I kept messing it up, so I wrote a thing that says, do this, and if it fails, stop the whole thing, make me fix it. Then, no, if it works, go on and do the next thing. It was just the structure that you would find from a shell program. I did not learn my lesson to not distribute your code. And so Tux started asking for all sorts of new features, which I was glad to put in, actually. 2003, what happened? I got involved in a land war in Asia, so there's a big void in there. Right when I get back from my being involved in a land war in Asia, I write this thing. No one uses it anymore because you use the much cooler CPAN minus. But oh man, what a kick in the ego to realize that your thing is on every Macintosh computer. Like since they distribute Perl, I guess this is with Linux too. Linux is a nice operating system. Some people use it, I hear, but the Apple stuff has every Apple thing has my program on it. No one uses it, but it's still there. Okay, again, the lesson: if people don't use your code, they don't complain. So make tools. This is the thing that I like to do. As I'm like making tools more than I like making applications and that sort of stuff, because you start getting into big things. This is the same year that this thing comes out. Who remembers this? If you can't read it, it says Subversion. Was that sort of like a Orange Revolution sort of hand sign that everyone just put up? We thought this was going to be cool. And we all sort of got into it, and then we realized that we didn't follow the advice. Oh, I'm sorry, the wrong slide. Never branch in SVN. Every time I've had to do this in a serious project, when I wanted to merge, I had to go find the guy who was the merge master, and he'd had to sit with me and walk through it, and that was a half-day thing. That calendar invite was from after lunch until I go home. Okay, that's the same year I wrote this thing, Brian's Guide to Solving Any Perl Problem. Much of the lessons I've talked about are in there, like just don't write code and don't give it to anyone to run and stuff like that. It's actually got translated into a bunch of different languages. I think people find it's helpful, but it's your basic stuff. You probably know it. You've probably seen it. It's in Mastering Perl. It's all over the place. Like, see that it compiles. That's a good first step. Try it with warnings, that sort of stuff. Okay, who wants to guess what year comes after 2004? You guys are so smart. 2005, and then I'm back. I'm working with Stonehenge still. I am talking to Randall because we're hanging out in bars, because that's what Randall does. And then this happens, Learning Perl 4th edition. I get my name on that because I'm saying to Randall, hey, we really got to update this book, which is the foundation of all of our classes. And he says, I delegate to you. You hang out in bars, you end up writing books. If you do it long enough. Okay, 2006, I don't learn my lesson because I forgot about this one, but Wendy actually has a copy on the bookshelf there, is that I wrote a workbook to go along with the Learning Perl, which is just additional exercises. And I actually think I wrote more in the explanations of the exercises than I did of the book in the Learning Perl stuff, because most of that was already there from Tom Phoenix. That was the year that We invent master classes, I think. Not invent them. Classes had always been given at the conferences in some way, I think. It wasn't a new concept. It wasn't revolutionary. But I said, we want to get people like Damien and Larry and all these sort of other people here. How can we pay them to come? Well, let's get people to take classes from them. We'll pass on that money to them, and so on. So when you think about that, when you see classes given at a conference, don't think, wow, why do I want to spend $100 to take a class? Think, wow, why do I want to spend €100 or whatever you guys use nowadays? Bitcoin? I don't know. Why do I want to spend 0.50 Bitcoin to take this class? Because what is that now? That's $15? Oh, what is, it's up $3,000 I think it was yesterday. Anyway, think I'm contributing to bring this person to this conference, well, then I get to meet and then they get to be at the conference. Okay, but then I'm thinking I'm involved in all this stuff. I'm helping with a conference. Oh, I'm sorry, wrong slide. Don't volunteer to organize a YAPC. Never again, never again. All the organizers I've talked to here, and this is fun to do during the conference, they're like, never again. Never. There's never going to be another YAPC, although there will be one in Glasgow because they don't know yet. At this YAPC, we do this video. Which one am I? Am I on the one on the left or the right? Quick, quick. Who's the other guy? You guys know. The students who sit in the front row, they're going to leave an apple on my table here. We make this video. Now, the funny thing about this video is that since I wrote the script, because I'm not an actor, I'm not trained, I'm never going to show up on James Lipton's show, I am mouthing the dialogue of the other people. Because I'm playing it in my head, but it's... Okay. Pugs gets invented. So I'm like, oh, great, we can do all this Perl 6 stuff. What lesson did I learn from that? Oh, sorry, wrong slide. So I'm writing a Perl 6 book now. This is the 4th time I've tried this. This time for sure. No, this one is actually going very well. The other times, I was given a Perl 6 talk. I was going to show up. I was sitting in the front row, ready to go on stage. Audrey comes up to me and says, hey, can I see your slides? I give her my computer. She's looking at them, and she's typing. She's changing my slides. So wait a minute, I have to present. No, this is different. Okay, so it's different from the night before. That's fine. I can deal with the changes because they weren't that bad. I'm getting up and giving the talk. I say something. Damien is in the audience. I distinctly remember this. It doesn't have to be true. It just has to be in my memory. He says, I say something. He says, oh, no, I just fixed that. And then I said, oh, this will be a really good idea. And okay, again, in my memory, it's better than if it was actually true. Larry's like, okay, that's done now. It's pushed. So I waited a little while to let it calm down, and I think we've actually calmed down now. Curiously, that is the same year that Git came out. Git was released to the public. And Randall, of course, goes crazy for this. And I am using all the stuff that is the plumbing, because Randall wants to do it, and so I have to do it too. And all sorts of nice things happen. Finally, we're off of the subversion stuff. Then 2008 happens. We didn't expect it, but it came right after 2007. And I do this. And then I do this. And then this happens. So I've gone from doing Usenet stuff, I was on Perl Monks for a while, and then now I graduated to Stack Overflow, where I'm still sort of doing stuff. There's an interesting thing that happens when you get off of things that are devoted to just your topic. There's a lot better pollination and a lot better representation of your particular thing to the wider community. And I think this is why Stack Overflow is so much better. It's not devoted to a particular topic. So if you go there and you are a person who's been doing, say, .NET, and you just have this quick Perl question, you go to the same place you get your .NET answers, and you see a really good Perl answer. Now, if you go there and you ask for answers and other sort of things, you tend to get a crap answer. I don't know if this is just because I use Perl and I understand it already, but the Perl people who answer there are really, really good. The people who answer other questions, not so good. There's a lot of guessing in other communities. So how do I do this in Python? And I get all these answers just like, well, I don't even know Python, and I know that's wrong, and so on. Anyway, there is a conference in Portugal, and I get to design a t-shirt. I didn't actually do this, someone else did this, but I said, hey, you got this shield that has 5 things in the middle of it. We have 5 sigils, so we put that in there. I wanted them to do a shirt that had a gradient of red and then green, because that's the Portuguese flag, and then you put the shield in the middle. They said, we're not going to spend $50 on a t-shirt, and I say, why not? And they say, because, and I say, okay. That's how a lot of arguments end with me. And then this happens. How many people use this? Not the cat, not there. GitHub happens, and this is brilliant because this allows us to do things where people can send us a merge request, a pull request, and we can just press a button and it happens. This is much better than Subversion, where I have to do all sorts of crazy things and no one would send me a patch because no one wanted to deal with it. 2009. As I go on, there's a middle here where I must have taken drugs or something because I don't remember much from these years. But this happens. How many people know this? This is the IT crowd. And there's a website devoted to finding all the little things in the different frames. Someone has gone through and done all these frame captures, and then they've made it black and white, and they've highlighted the bits. And so, I watch this about once a year, the whole series, and then I usually convince a friend to come sit with me, and then I freeze it, say, hey, look, there's the camel. That's cool. This was before I had any involvement with that book, because that year I was working on this thing. Now, I'm pretty proud of my involvement with this book, but I still think that the first edition was one of the best books ever written on Perl. There's 3 really good books that were written on Perl. There's Joseph Hall's first edition, Effective Perl Programming, Mark Jason Dominus's Higher Order Perl, and I think probably the first edition of the Camel, the one that's about that thick, not the one that's about that thick. Amazing pieces of Perl literature, much better than anything I've ever done. But I still get to do the second edition. And then I didn't realize that that was the same year that this happened. I started a Twitter account. Twitter, I guess, is where you're supposed to have conversations. I post stuff and then I just ignore everyone. It's like I have headphones on and I'm walking around the office just, you don't exist, you don't exist, you don't exist. I just post things that people want to see. But this is another curious thing, is that I don't particularly care for this social media, but other people do. And so they should be able to find the things that they want from me in the place that they prefer to get it. This also happens this year. Blogs.perl.org. And this is the thing, it's in Perl, we can contribute to it, we can make it better, we can make it stronger, we can make it faster. We have the technology. But what did I learn? Oh, sorry, wrong slide. Don't write it in Perl. So I use WordPress nowadays because it's the least hassle for me. I don't care that it's PHP, I don't care that it's crap, I care that I don't have to do anything. 2010, I can't remember anything that happened good in that year. Did anyone have a good 2010? No woohoos. It just sucked for everybody. 2011, I start working on this, the 4th edition of Programming Perl. If you ever get the chance to work on a book with Tom Christensen, you will learn more than you ever have in any other sort of environment. He would send programs to me written in Catalan, because you can do that in Perl, because you can put Unicode identifiers in there. And then I would have to decode the program, figure out what it meant, translate the strings, and then there would be like a clever joke in there. And I go like, thanks, Tom, I just spent all day doing that. You could have just said that the kerning is incorrect on page 12. We designed this book to be a 10-year book. That's how I convinced O'Reilly that it was a good idea to let us do it. Make this book good for 10 years. And that was, what, 2011? So we got to start working on the next one. Someone has to start working on the next one. My involvement on this is strictly the boring bits, all the stuff that Tom didn't want to do, and Tom wanted to do all the good stuff. 2012, another edition of the student workbook. I don't know which one they have back there. They only have one of the editions. Wendy, you have a hole in your library. I don't actually know if we ever printed this one. This might have just been a PDF. But that same year, I started my Become a CPAN Author workshop. 3 hours. You don't have to do anything. Show up with your computer. We will get you a PAWS account. We will get you a GitHub account. We will have you upload things. You'll get to see how CPAN testers work. You'll get pull requests from your fellow students. It's actually really nice, and I just didn't have time to present it here. 2013 starts, and I'm working with all sorts of companies that want to do crowdfunding things for the arts and various things. And so I say, hey, I got to try this myself, and I run a crowd tilt campaign to get Jeffrey Tallhammer funded for some features for Pinto. Does anyone use Pinto? Anyone contribute to this crowd tilt campaign? The curious thing here is that crowd tilt is a Perl company. Their stuff was written in Perl. They've now become Tilt, and they just got bought out by someone, so they're not anything anymore. But we found out that even though this stuff that Jeffrey was making that would manage your CPAN library so you can manage your applications would save companies lots of time, no one actually wanted to buy it. Oh, I've overflowed my lessons here. I'm sorry. I was only going to give you 20, and now I'm way over that. I do another thing to make the Perl Nerd Merit Badges. Did anyone buy one of these? Wow. Wow. I think all of you who bought one are here. And then I kept going. I wanted to get into this crowdfunding stuff to see how it worked because a lot of people around me were trying to figure out the technology around it. And so there was this thing called Cat and Can, and I forget who started this, names that you would recognize. And the thing was, the first 10 projects that are successfully funded will get no fees for life. And I said, oh yeah, I'm going to be one of those. And then I'll just run campaigns for everyone and they'll make no money and then they'll shut down. That was my, oh no, they weren't gonna, that wasn't my goal to shut them down. It's just was like, how are you going to make money off of this? And so I wanted to do a feature for CPAN, my little script, something about looking up the fastest mirror or something like that. And then I went and I was going to try it, how do you donate so I can explain to other people. I didn't realize that I completely funded my own campaign. So I gave them $800 and they gave me back $800 because no fees. I was going to get free for life, but then they shut down right after that. I think I'm the only one who ever funded something on there, and because I was too stupid to use the web form. And then I tried it with Kickstarter. I started doing Kickstarter things, mostly because I'm working with companies who do this sort of stuff, and I run some of my own. I don't advise anyone ever run a Kickstarter. You are in dread every day of the thing being in existence, that where are they going to come, am I going to be successful? It actually takes a lot of work. People think that you go to the web page, you start a campaign, and then this is the start of it. No. 60 days before you start your campaign, you line up all your major sponsors. Get them primed, get them ready, tell them it's going to launch on this day, have their checkbooks ready. And then you start your campaign, you have another 30 days, and there's a schedule. You have to be 75% funded in the first 3 or 4 days, or your project's not going to work. All this sort of stuff. If you decide you want to do that for anything, feel free to email me. The trick is you just have to find out what my email address is. 2016, we're getting closer to today. I go to the Alpine Perl workshop and I give this talk on this little bit of code, the Schwartzian transform, which wasn't always called that. Tom Christensen was calling it the black transform for a while. Randall was claiming that he got it from Lisp because everyone does it there. So I went to Stack Overflow and I said, hey, here's my Lisp implementation of the Schwartzian transform. Does this look like Lisp to you? And they said, no. I said, but does it look like something you guys do? And they're like, no. So Randall, did you really do this in Lisp? He's like, I don't know. But it sounds good. It's a decorate, sort, undecorate sort of thing. I wrote an article for Perl Tricks on this. Very curious. We just sort of accept that it's a thing today, but it was not so clear at the beginning. 2017, that's this year, right? Where am I? Amsterdam. I'm doing this. I'm working on learning Perl 6. And I'm doing it in a way that I'm just pretending Perl 5 never existed. And it's actually working better that way. Some of the other things I said when I tried the books previously, like, so if you're used to Perl 5, this is how you do it in Perl 6. Just get rid of all that. It's a much easier ride. So there's also a Twitter thing for that. I'm almost out of my time here. So 2018, that's next year, but I'm still going to tell you what I learned. There's a lot of new features in 5.28. I have a slide deck on that, on SlideShare that you can download. Sawyer is here. He knows about many of these things. He promises me that he will make a decision on all of them. He didn't tell me what the decision would be, but they're there. Also, I think my next thing we need to do is listener Ju-jitsu. You might have gone to Damien's speaker Aikido class, but no, we need to counter that now. Different fighting style. Counter his tiger style. Because in 2019, this is what I want. We're all going to compete to get something better. Okay, so looking back on all of these things that I've done, what have we learned? What's the one thing that I want you to learn?
Never get involved in a land war in Asia.
Thank you. I hope that was subliminally in there enough. Also, don't write a Perl blog engine. That's the second one. The classic blunders. If you want to know more about this sort of stuff, there are some links there. There is a CPAN history page, which I had never seen before. Don't worry about copying this down or taking a picture of the screen. Just go to the SlideShare thing and get it. There's an old history.perl.org thing that Elaine Ashton had started a long, long time ago where I remembered a lot of things that I had done. And the web page where I keep a list of all my talks and all that sort of stuff, and of course my SlideShare stuff. Thank you for coming. If you remember anything else I did that I didn't remember, please tell me, because it has been 20 years and I'm getting older. Otherwise, enjoy your conference. And if you have anything that you want to ask me, catch me on the side. Remember, I have those Perl t-shirts. And I'll see you later. Thank you.